Hey everybody, welcome to the Ignited Podcast, Striking Industrial Automation Conversations. We're your hosts. I'm Travis Cox.
And I'm Thomas Burke.
And this episode is called 3 Engineers, 1 Ignition Platform, 0 Ceilings. Today we sit down with Todd Ebright, Kirsten Neumeyer, and Matthew Scoffin from Martin CSI. 3 engineers at 3 very different stages of their ignition journey, and they're going to tell us exactly how they built their way here, from certification to solving problems to award-winning projects. So thanks y'all for coming on to the show.
Thanks
Happy
for
to be
having
here.
us.
So let's start with some introductions today. Todd, Kirsten, Matthew, can each of you take a moment to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about your background and your role at Martin CSI?
I'll go ahead and start. I'm Todd Ebright. I am a controls engineer. Been with Martin Controls for about 15 years. I have a BS in electrical engineering and TUV SFS Tech certified.
I'm Kirsten Neumeyer. I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering. I'm a controls engineer here at Martin CSI, and I've been here for about 4 years now.
I'm Matthew F. Scoffin. I got a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering. I'm a design engineer here at Martin, and I've been here for a little bit over a year now.
So, Todd, can you tell me about Martin CSI as an organization and your history as a premier system integrator?
Would love to. So Martin CSI is a system integrator in the Columbus, Ohio area. We started in 1993, so 30 plus years in business. We offer a broad scope of core automation services that include control panel design, control and equipment upgrades, motion controls, PLC programming, SCADA, HMI development, robotics, the works. We've done over 2,000 plus complete projects with great success. We are certified in multiple integrator designations. CSIA certified. We were System Integrator of the Year in 2011, a 2016 Ignition Firebrand Award winner. We work in many areas, so this includes automotive, bakery products, construction materials, energy, food and bev, pharmaceuticals, and plastics, and a lot more. We are core and gold certified with Ignition. I think we've been working with your guys' platform for over 10 plus years. So we've been through a lot of the training, have done a lot of projects, and like to think we're well versed in Ignition.
Absolutely, and we're excited to have you guys, in the program and all the exciting work that you and your team have been doing. The projects, as you said, you won a Firebrand, 10 years ago, and you also are in the Discover Gallery again for ICC in 2026. So people have to come to ICC and see that amazing project, which we'll be talking about here today. Before we get into the episode, we have a segment where we're going to throw around some industry terms and jargons throughout the episode, and we're going to throw 4 of these at you guys to see if you can figure out which of the 4 is fabricated. So it's kind of a segment called Real or Fabricated, and we're going to see which of these that is made up. You guys ready for that?
Yep.
All right. So the first is BACnet. The second is alarm rationalization. The third is CDAT. And the last is ISA 95.
My guess is CDAT. I've never
I was
heard
thinking,
of that.
yeah, CDAT sounds fine. BACnet seems like a good term. Let's do CDAT.
All right. Well, you'd be right. CDAT is the one that we made up there, because you could throw around four letters, put a lot of them in there, and it kind of sounds real, right?
Does it mean anything?
But for the real ones, BACnet is a well-known building automation protocol. Alarm rationalization is a technique we do to, in our HMI systems, right, to make sense of all the alarms we have configured in the system and make sure we have them prioritized and categorized correctly.
And ISA 95 is a standard that's been existing forever from the ISA technology that addressing very important concepts.
So today we're going to talk with you guys about three different areas of your ignition journey. We want to first kind of explore certification in your journey to becoming an ignition engineer. We also want to look at some various problems and solutions that each of you have accomplished over the years with ignition, and then we'll dive into a couple of projects that Martin has built out. So let's start with the certification. A lot of engineers' early beginnings is to get certified in the product, right? To really learn it and get certified. So my first question is going to be for you, Kirsten. beyond just passing a test, what does being a certified ignition engineer actually mean to you, and how has it changed the way you approach your work?
Yeah, I think becoming certified in ignition has definitely made me more confident using the platform. I went through Inductive University, watched all the videos, took my ignition core test, made sure I got a good understanding of the platform, and then the Ignition Gold certification, tested my setting up the gateways, setting up a project from scratch, building my own components, adding my own scripting, talking to an SQL database. And it really made sure that I had the fundamentals down and was able to build projects on my own after that. Getting my gold certification was also nice because I've used and pulled things from my certification and used them in future projects and projects that I've done since then. Knowing that I had a good foundation, something that was tested and inductive approved of through my certification, and so definitely a lot more confident moving forward.
Wow. So Matthew, you're next on our list. So you earned your gold certification very fast. What surprised you most about ignition? And when you were going through the process, what got you most excited about the platform?
Yeah, so what surprised me most was at the start, it was a lot of information just right off the rip, trying to figure out how everything worked. But as you get further into it, you realize how universal the software really is, just how many capabilities that it has. And as I like to say, it can do more than it can't. It can connect to more softwares than it can. It's just so universal. But beyond that, just with the sheer amount of possibilities inside of it, it just surprised me how easily you could design such in-depth screens, or not in-depth at all. You can get to a level of detail in ignition that was beyond what I thought that you can do. And compared to HMIs, it's incredible. And even to the point that I know we'll touch on in a little bit, but vision and perspective, being able to go from something that you could do in an HMI screen and put it on a phone as well and do it all in one software very seamlessly.
So I know, you did your test and your learning in pretty fast. So how fast was that? To give the audience a sense of, what your journey was at the beginning there.
Yeah, so the videos, I went through, tried to get through them as quickly as possible because I like kind of a shotgun effect when I start learning something. I just want to hit as much as I can, as fast as I can. So in about 2 weeks, I did all of the Inductive University videos, got the quizzes done, went through the videos as quickly as I could. The core, before taking the core, I went through, there's a good little challenge with a gateway backup on inductive automation. And I ran through all those little steps for perspective. I chose one or the other, perspective or vision. And after going through that, I thought I had a really good baseline for the core, in which I did. It felt like I had way more time than I needed on the core certification. I got through those exams in way less time than was given. And taking the core probably spread it out over 3 or 4 days. And then from there, I felt very confident with doing the challenge problem to go straight into the gold exam, which probably took me 1 to 2 weeks alongside of what else I was doing currently at the time.
That's amazing. It's amazing. You put your mind to it and you got through it and you successfully completed and got certified.
Yeah. So Todd, you've been working with Ignition now for 10 plus years. And you've gone through many iterations of the product in that time period. I mean, there's been a lot of new revisions of Ignition, new versions coming out, and you got to stay up to speed with that. So what has it been like to stay, to not only get certified initially, but to stay certified over the years? Has been a lot of new features and advancements with Ignition.
Yeah, I think through the years, it's one of those things, being excited to use a platform and always willing to learn. I think when I started back with Vision, it was new, exciting. It was different than a lot of the other HMI SCADA applications that we worked on. Less rigid, there was some flexibility, and it did a lot. And I think through the years, I did my core certification. I mean, it's been a long time. I was up through, I think, 7.9, then did 8. But I think the other thing is, as you learn this stuff, you don't get good at it until you apply it. And that's, when you get into projects. My first big project was a simulator for the Army. And within that project, I learned worked on vector graphics, lots and lots of scripting, just getting familiar with the platform. And I think it was the first time that I really was able to apply what I'd learned. And, obviously, as you start working through projects, you learn new things. Another big part through the years is collaboration. I frequent your guys' community forum a lot. And I know through there, when I've had issues, how do you solve something? Ignition is vast. There's a lot of ways to solve one thing. And sometimes someone might have a good idea. So, you get on there, you post a few things, and, someone comes up with an idea, and it's like, oh, that's a great solution. And then the other thing is, technology's changing. You guys are keeping up with a lot of stuff. You bring out new things, forefront of, the industry. And a lot of times we don't get to touch something until a project comes in. So I know we're always open to new things. And I think that's another thing as you're learning to work with Ignition. You can't be stubborn, open new ideas, new things. I know a lot of times as a system integrator, you get set in your ways and you become very good at one thing. And I think that's another thing. It's cool to hear with Matt, when he learned it, he dove in and it was a challenge, but like once he got over that hurdle, he really was able to learn and enjoy it. I know a lot of the products we get with Ignition are fun. I think that's a big part of it. You want to like what you do. It doesn't want to be a drag. So I would say the big thing is, get your hands in there through the years, as long as you're learning constantly, never stop learning. I think that's really important. And having fun at work. So Ignition is definitely a fun platform. There's a lot to learn. And tons of resources out there. So definitely take advantage of that. That's the best way I think to learn and grow.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing you mentioned there, I want to point out is that you mentioned the simulator or the Army simulator you built 10 years ago. And that won a Firebrand award at ICC at Discover Gallery. And so it's on the website. I would encourage everybody to go check out that project because it was a really cool project where the Army used it to understand how to run these operations. And it was a complete full simulator that you would run through rather than just reading a book. You actually get to firsthand experience. So it was a really neat project, and you learn a lot from that. You go from that being a big vision project to one we're going to talk about later that's full perspective, and that really kind of covers that whole gamut, right, of how Ignition has changed.
Exactly.
So, Todd, you mentioned a little bit earlier, just when you talked about the Ignition Community Forum, and that you have both contributed to the forum and you've taken away from the forum. You also, told me about the support team and how they made a real difference in some of the things that you've done. Can you talk a little bit about how they helped you or shaped some of the work you did?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, when I first got into Vision, it's new, and there was a lot of times you didn't know how to do something. And I'd linger on the forums, and there was a point where I jumped in and, finally was like, hey, I have a problem. I want to get to this. And there's a ton of users that are active and excited about the platform. And I think, it shows on the forums. People are on there, posting at like 7 p.m. at night. You get responses. They're active. They're excited to share. I remember with the simulator, there was some animation stuff I was working on. And, I wanted to show some flow on a line. And it was, I didn't know the best way to approach that. On an old HMI, you would use like an animation function. And I actually was fairly new to working with Java, and I got on there. I think I had a solution in I feel like a couple of days, which was great. A lot of times you're trying to find a solution, it's like it might take you weeks to get there, and just everybody's brains collabing and getting all that information out there. It's just it's awesome. And I know another thing was with your guys' tech support. It was a big the project was huge, and we had to get some stuff done. I had some issues with doing some vector graphics, and I think at some point we hit a limit in Java, and you get burned out. You're working hard on these projects, and you don't think of like a simple solution. And I think at some point with your tech, they were like, "Let's make an image, create a JPEG off of the vectors you're drawing." Ignition's awesome. You can draw all kinds of stuff. I mean, it is visually, you can make it look stunning. If you guys see the simulator project, go check it out. Very beautiful project. But it was something where you guys were interacting with me. I mean, I talked to your tech support, and we got to what the root cause was and how to get there to solve it. And I know a lot of other vendors, we don't necessarily have the best support. I know some vendors I won't mention shut off at 5 p.m. And you can't get a hold of someone. But yeah, it was, and moving forward, I think having that knowledge that you guys are supportive of your designers, the integrators, those working with the platform is really big. It definitely allows us as integrators to be more open to what we can provide to customers. I think that's another problem a lot of times you run into where you don't have that backing and you kind of get stuck with what, an app or an HMI can do, so that's huge. And it definitely has changed, I think, how we work, with your guys' product. So love that. Moving forward, it's something we get excited about. We're not limited.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
And Kirsten, coming over to you, I know we talked before, you had a customer who had, had a project where from a visualization standpoint, there was no built-in component to do what you need to do, for that. And I just think it's kind of cool to talk about these types of things where you've had to overcome that. So can you kind of explain what the customers needed there and what you did to solve that?
Yeah, so we were working on converting an existing application over to Ignition, and there was a production status toolbar or indicator at the bottom of the screen that tracked the states of production over the last 12 hours. And like you said, I couldn't really quite get any standard Ignition components to work, so I ended up building my own. What I ended up doing was using a Flex container, and I would scale it based off of how long production was in that state over the 12 hours. And then I would fill the Flex container with the corresponding color. And then I used a Flex repeater to then put the series of Flex containers together. And then so it would appear as just one standard 12-hour tracking data on the main home screen for them. And the customer was really excited for it because it ended up looking almost identical to the screen that they already had. So integrating it for their operators, it was seamless. There was hardly any changes for them. So they were very happy for that.
I got to say that in perspective, for all of these prospective developers out there, it's a Flex container for the win, right?
Yes.
If you're not starting out your view as a Flex container, you should probably consider doing that because it's the most versatile to start with, and then you can combine other containers in there and bring it in. But with the Flex container combined with the Flex repeater to make it dynamic, to have multiple rows being automatically or columns, it was a very good use of those components to solve that problem for sure.
So I know there's going to be a lot of other system integrators listening to this podcast, and they're going to want to know exactly how you did that. So we'll talk about how we share that later on. So Matthew, now for you. Even early in your journey, you had to figure a lot of different things out and really push through a bunch of challenges as you were doing different things for, a variety of projects. Can you share something you overcame or that you built that you're really proud of and walk us through the problem you were trying to solve?
Yeah, so I haven't been on really many projects yet, but I think the gold certification is just a really good example of it. Just getting right into it, the first thing you got to do is connect up a database. And my background is not with connecting databases or scripting or doing anything really background in a program. So initially starting off, I was like, wow, that's a lot. But I knew I watched a couple videos on it from Inductive Automation University, and I know the manual has a really good guide on how to get them hooked up and how to start it and name certain things and then naming conventions and how it all works together. And just starting with that and getting that done was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. All the softwares I needed to download, all of the connections I needed to make. But beyond that was scripting with SQL and other languages inside of the designer was also a big hurdle at the start. Getting things to pull from the database and then creating new rows and putting data back into the database so that I could display it on another screen and getting the screens to all bind to each other and just updating everything correctly, because when I got to certain points, it was like, all right, I could make a gateway script to automatically update, or I could do individual scripts. And then that gets into the whole talk of CPU usage and overhead of the program, which you don't want to overdo it, but you also don't want your program to be struggling because of it.
Yeah, I think there's an important saying, right, with Ignition that the great thing about Ignition is you can build anything you want and you can approach it a lot of different ways. And the bad thing about Ignition is you can build whatever you want because there's so many ways. So what you do is you learn over your career, you learn the different ways you might approach different kinds of problems, especially like with scripting, like where what's the best use for that? Where do I put, my scripts to make them run most effectively and do the exact logic that we want? And as you get into more projects, there's a lot more of those that you'll be figuring out. So speaking of projects, let's kind of get into some of the projects that Martin CSI has built. And Todd, I was fortunate to come out there to Ohio to your offices not that long ago. You had a discovery day where you brought customers in the office and we're kind of showcasing, the various projects, the various, the things that, you guys can do with Ignition. And I was able to participate in that event, and you had a customer, IGS Energy, come there and they actually, showcased their project. And I was really inspired by that project, and thought would be a really good one for you to share here today. So can you give the audience a sense of what IGS is doing and your role, what you built for them?
Yeah, I'd love to. That was really fun. It was exciting to have customers come in and get to share something that we worked on. So IGS Energy, they have gone to various dairy farms, mostly around Ohio and Indiana, and have set up biogas digesters, which are basically a process to convert cow manure and gas into a renewable natural gas. They heat the gas, collect it, purify it, and then inject it into utility pipelines to be used at homes. I know during the day we were there, we were told a figure of how many cows it takes to heat a home. And it was, I don't remember the exact number, but it was just kind of ridiculous. But
it wasn't that many. That was the crazy part about it.
It was impressive. Yeah, so they take the gas and then they take the data, submit it to the government to get credits. And so this customer isn't a typical controls company. They had some connections with our owner and came to us and found out we were a good fit for a solution that they needed. So they have all these farms in different locations, different companies that they basically set up their system. And it's being driven by several different vendors with PLCs, different control systems. And the idea is they have to collect all this data, gas production. There's a bunch of different things the government requires. We won't get the details, but they have to get this data to a central location where they can manage it and make sense of it, and then get that to the EPA so they can get credits. And what's neat with Ignition is we made use of edge devices, and we set those up in all the different farms. And within those edge devices, we had sensors that were collecting data, so we were using historical trends. And then we had to get those all linked to a central hub. So we talked about a hub and spoke model, and Ignition's perfect for that. So at another location, they have a hub, which is where it's pulling in all that data and sorting it, allowing them accessibility. So that's the other big thing that was really cool. We created a mobile app, which allowed them to access this data from anywhere. That was a big hit with our customer. And I know in the past with Vision, a lot of that stuff was, it's site specific. You install it, you got to be at the machine. So that was really cool. It was neat. We made, a desktop version and a mobile using a Flex container, which was really helpful. So case in point. But yeah, it was great. And the cool thing is the customer was excited. We would add features. At some point we had management data where you could see the hardware. If something goes down, I can have a manager get on there and be like, hey, a pump's not running, and have their tech go out there and check it. So at the end of the day, it was something cool with Ignition where, this is what the customer needed. We were able to provide a solution. It was simple. And, again, the biggest thing too with this is as they add farms, we're able to grow quickly. So we actually created a tag-based design, and each site has different number of sensors. And so, one might have 80, one might have 100. We can dump the same application, create our tags, and it's going to generate widgets and modules and bring all that into the program without us having to design it, individually. So Ignition's flexible, was able to grow quickly. And at the end of the day, we were able to create an application that was visually stunning to the customer, easily accessible, and it was something that, again, they were excited about. So we're happy to share this at ICC, of course.
Yeah, so you guys submitted that project to Discover Gallery for ICC. So encourage people to come to ICC and check out the full project itself. I think it's a really great project in the object-oriented design. The idea is you have distributed architecture. You are building, those building blocks, those objects, UDTs locally that for the different kinds of ways you want to visualize that data. you're storing and forwarding that data up to a centralized system that's all perspective, so they can see it anywhere they want. Any phone or browser, tablet, whatever they want, they can go there, log into their system securely, and of course, and see their data. And as you add new sites, as you add new data, it just automatically shows up in that application. You're not having to go do any more configuration on there. And I thought that was a very unique part of this project, Todd. You specifically chose not to build one-off screens. You build them as in this very object-oriented, manner, so that it can scale fast. And that's been huge for them. I mean, I think we had IGS. They were talking about that. What does this mean for them as they go forward?
Yeah, I think it was just, like I said, they were excited, because I think the big thing too is, as this project has grown, we've added new functions. So we're working at getting some camera setup, displays that we can see the farm live. So I know for them, they've invested money in this. So up front was a lot of work, and we did a lot of that development. And then of course down the road, the back end's a lot easier. So they're excited too, because I know at some point they might convert this into a service. But from a development standpoint, our path with them moving forward is easy. It's a good partnership. They tell us, hey, we got a farm, let's make some tweaks. We could add in there. I know another thing, I didn't bring this up earlier. We had an issue with a driver and a COM driver, and we didn't have it at the time, Modbus TCP. Then you guys released the Micro 800, which actually made our deployment even easier. So it's nice to have a project with a customer that on their end, it looks seamless and easy. They don't know how much work we put into it. I assume they know, but yeah, it's great for both parties.
For sure.
You guys have really, crossed the bridge in doing a lot of different projects. And Kirsten, you told me about a project that you worked on, Energy Insights, for the state of Indiana. And what I thought was really unique about it was funded by the state, basically to, building Industry 4 solutions focused at energy reduction. Can you set the scene of what that program was and what they were trying to accomplish, and what Martin CSI's role was, and what you personally did for this project?
Yeah, so like you said, this was a state-funded initiative in the state of Indiana for small to medium-sized manufacturers to provide them with smart manufacturing toolkits to track their energy usage and to ultimately give them some energy cost savings in their plants. The starter kit came with both hardware and software free to the customers, and they ended up getting a group of integrators together to help design and build this to deploy to the businesses. And what I thought was really cool about the initiative was that the users were encouraged to build on top of it, put in their own inputs, add to the ignition screens, continue using the hardware that was put in there for them. It wasn't just to track energy usage. It was to give them something that they might not already have in their plant and show them what the possibilities are. Martin was introduced in the beginning of the process. We were tasked with designing the base screens for the project. It started with a couple hand sketches of how they wanted the graphs to look, what data they wanted to show, what inputs we would be given, how the alarms they wanted to show. And I ended up creating about 5 or 6 screens for them. And it was really cool because I got to use the customer's design standards. They showed us a couple web pages of some other applications that they really liked, and I was able to draw from that and get really creative with it. I was able to use the customer's design standards, their custom color palette, add their logos, which can be sometimes limiting, like we've talked about with certain HMIs and stuff. It's kind of early 2000s, and you get a couple colors to pick from here and there. But it was a lot of fun getting to be creative with it, kind of going back and forth with the customer, tweaking it, making sure it was something that they were proud of as well. And then it's really cool to see that multiple plants were able to use this. And it was a project that wasn't just a one-time use. It was going to be deployed in multiple places. And it was also good because the aspect of it was to help the environment, which is always a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. It was a really interesting project. I mean, the state was pretty forward thinking and saying, "Hey, we want to invest in our manufacturers. We want to let them dip their toes in Industry 4.0. We know energy is a big problem. It's on the rise, right, Tom? I mean, you're from there, so exactly. Around there, so industry, the energy is going up, and so they funded this where they gave manufacturers who signed up a kit, which included the hardware and software, as you said, Kirsten, and ultimately connected assets to get energy information up, and you built the dashboards where they can see it and they can make real decisions off of that data.
And hopefully you can use this project on a number of other opportunities as well.
And it allows them, as they go forward, they have Ignition. They have the foundation. They can build more. They can add more. And I just thought that was really, really cool. It's a
really cool. Very
great way to get started with that. And good job on the project, for that. I believe, that program's still going on and still strong, which is pretty cool to see. So Matt, I want to come over to you because you bring a different perspective, right? You're new. You haven't, as you said, haven't done a lot of projects, but what are you excited about working on? Where are you going next? I'm sure you're hungry to get that first project under your belt.
Yeah, so there are currently two kind of in the pipeline, one bigger than the other. One's just doing an upgrade on some existing machines and existing process, and it'll be upgrading the ignition screen in Vision just to add a couple more functions, make sure the new machinery is binded correctly, make sure that we're getting that data inside of our screen, and then also update the screen so that we can see more functionality that the customer wants now. And the other one that's a lot bigger, a lot more needed to go into it, we're converting a whole HMI to Ignition. So all the background scripting that we'll need to do, all new views, all new components from scratch. And that much like you were saying earlier, that gives the opportunity to put those scripts and learn those lessons of maybe I shouldn't have used this container compared to that container. Maybe I should have started here instead of there. The script shouldn't be a gateway script. It should be for screen kind of thing. Just getting all those pop-ups and everything. And the one really nice thing is I think that gold certification exam is really useful. There's so many aspects to it that are so usable. One of the things that I like the most, it's probably not going to be part of this project, but the carousel feature of being able to swipe through things for perspective, I think is just so cool. And you can auto-populate that too when you add things on. It's just a feature that's like, wow, I didn't even realize you could do that. And it's one of those things that in order to pass the test, you have to do. So it's like almost kudos to showing us a lot of the features and making us to do that if you want to be gold certified. But it also makes us much better and have more options when we're designing for a customer to make the screens in Vision and perspective look way better than just the average user.
Yeah, I bet, with a conversion project like that, it's a larger project. I'm sure there's lots of screens, lots of existing systems. They put a lot of time and effort into that. Now they're going to, modernize, get to Ignition, but that gives a lot of room for innovation because you don't just want to do same thing over again. You want to be able to, what can we do now differently and better? And you could bring your fresh perspective to that. Are you excited about that aspect?
Yeah, I've been told that I'll get to design a couple of the screens because I've been in there and I know the process a little bit. I'm not super strong in the scripting side of things, but I can definitely add own personal design to it.
But you'll learn quickly, I'm sure of that, based on what you've told us today. So to all three of you, where are you headed from here? And, what are you excited about, whether it's technology or a type of a project? Where do you see yourself growing, as engineers at Martin CSI?
I'll jump in first. So I like to think I'm the old dog of the group. I've been around Vision. I've done, enough. But it's cool to hear like Matt's side of the story. He got thrown into perspective, has a little bit of vision. But I know through the years we've kind of got our feet wet in a little bit of smaller projects. And I know with the IGS project, that was one that was nice because it was scalable. And I know we're looking forward to getting some more, larger enterprise type maybe projects that we could bring in. I think we're getting to a point where a lot of our engineers are getting well versed in the platform, and I think which is great. So we have a lot more opportunities to push the product. We work with a lot of different vendors, different products, but I know Ignition tends to be the most fun. And I know for me too, another thing, being around it long enough, I hope to be a mentor to some of the other engineers. Matt talked about scripting. I think I've had my pain points of learning scripting, binding. I've made some mistakes where things kind of get in the loop, take long to load. So to be able to give that advice to others as we learn, and plus, resources, I have people now I can reach out to in our company that we can say, hey, what did you do to do this? So I know for us, Ignition, keeping up on the technology and the trends and hopefully getting some more larger projects.
Yeah, I'm excited for more perspective projects. I love that you can build screens for big monitors down to small mobile devices. I think that's really cool, giving the customer some flexibility of how to display their data. And I'm also really excited to dig into Ignition 8.3. I've not really dabbled in it too much, but I hear there's a lot of cool new features, and I'm excited to start working with it.
Yeah, I would say that it's pretty short and sweet, but I want to see where, with how much AI has been used in everything and incorporated with everything, I kind of want to see where Ignition goes with that, whether they try to kind of go line in line with it and utilize it, or if they stay separate and try to combat that feature with their own kind of feature in the future, and just to see if that can help speed up design processes, because I know I like to use it as a starting point sometimes, just as a creation spark or an idea or something. So I'd be interested to see if that's something that's in the future.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, I was waiting for that to come up here. Absolutely, that's an important part of this journey, right? Like you're doing that conversion project, Matt, and if we could leverage AI to help us do that faster, or we can focus on the bigger, the things that we want that the customer wish they had. We can focus on those and deliver a lot of value. So all I can say on that front is stay tuned for ICC this year. About more that we're doing around AI. So definitely this is a year you cannot miss in September. So
AI is definitely the wave of the future, and it's here to stay. And we're very excited about what we're going to introduce at ICC.
For sure. And so we really appreciate all three of you coming on and sharing your different perspectives and talking about your journey, with working with Ignition. And it's definitely inspiring to kind of see where you've been to where you are going to go. But for the audience, how do they get connected to y'all? To you guys and to Martin CSI?
Yeah, you can find us at martincsi.com. And we're also on other social platforms, so Facebook and LinkedIn. Going through our website's probably the best. You can get through there, and there's an email to contact us.
Perfect. Well, definitely we encourage everybody to connect with them and see the projects that they built that are on Discover Gallery. Come to ICC and meet the team here. And for everybody else, as always, stay connected to the Ignited podcast. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. So you never miss an episode. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.